Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Rudd Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2012 comedy crime titled Stand Up Guys. Now, Stand Up Guys runs for 95 minutes long. It is directed by Fisher Stevens. It is produced by quite a list here. We have Sidney Kimmel, Tom Rosenberg, Gary Lucchese, and Jim Tauber. The script was written by Noah Hadley. The score was done by Lyle Workman. The cinematography was done by Michael Grady. And the editing was done by Mark Lavolsi. And the stars of the movie are Oscar-winning performers, for that matter. We have Al Pacino. We have Christopher Walken, we have Alan Arkin, we have Julianna Marguiles, Margolis, Katheryn Winnick, Vanessa Ferlito, Addison Timlin, Lucy Punch, Bill Burr, and Courtney Galiano. So, as his acting career is kind of pretty much reaching the final stages, but not yet, but soon, Al Pacino can still find many ways of reinventing himself in areas he's never been in before. Though his leading man days are pretty much kind of behind him, Al Pacino still feels there's some fuel left in his tank that no one could tell him otherwise, even by starring him in films below his talents, like Stand Up Guys. This is a character-driven vehicle, which would have been the type of film he would have dismissed about a decade ago. But like what Hollywood tends to like to do to the older veteran actors and actresses, they like to find ways to make them feel lower than they should. I mean, look at Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro was basically an untouchable, a guy who could do no wrong. And now he's being reduced to making an ass out of himself in stupid bullshit comedies. Well, Al Pacino, I don't want him to fall into that vernacular, but if he keeps continuing to make movies like this, he's gonna end up just like his old pal. Do you really want that to happen? I don't. Come on. Give Pacino something that we can sink our teeth into. I'm glad that Martin Scorsese is trying to reestablish him in a movie that's going to be coming out next year called The Irishman. So I hope this actually shows that Al Pacino is not a washed up has-been. But right now in the movie The Stand Up Guys, I get this feeling that his best days are behind him. If he's going to start in garbage movies like this, well then I think it's time for him to jump out of the whole mafia gangster type movies and maybe just sort of settle into more subtle, lighthearted dramas. But not to the extent where you're going to be lowered and to be kind of like labeled as a geriatric comic relief. I don't want that to happen. But at this rate, if he continues to be in movies like Stand Up Guys, well, that's the direction that he seems to be misfortunately heading. And he's not alone in this. I feel that like I feel he should perform in more of these character-driven dramas by the end of the 90s. That's why we went watch a legendary performer like Pacino slowly fade out his status as a top box office draw. Still, there's no one who has the nerve to arbitrarily say it to his face. Because I guess if you say it to his face, he's going to come up with his husky voice and tell you otherwise. And he probably won't be using too many good choice of words to tell you otherwise. If you know what I mean. But is there anybody out there who's brave enough to cast the first stone on him to say that Al Pacino's days are numbered? No one? I didn't think so. I still think that he has a lot of hope to continue to star in movies, but not movies that's gonna make a mockery of himself or fall into self-parody. I mean, come on now. Stand-Up Guys is amateur compared to some of these gangster movies that he was in the 80s and 90s. I mean, this is anything. This is far from Scarface or Carlito's Way or The Godfather. Come on now. Yes, he's playing a gangster. Yes, he's kicking ass and chewing gum. But unfortunately, he's all out of gum, so there's only choice for Plan A. But if the thing of the matter is, this movie does not help solidify his long-going resume. And if anybody thinks that this movie is a career high for Al Pacino, then I think there's probably something wrong with you. Because this movie is much to mock his career as opposed to solidify his career. Why? Just because he's been in a lot of great movies in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even some in the 2000s, but that now he feels that he's just gonna toss himself into these stupid movies? I don't want to think that. Come on now, I love Al Pacino. He's a legend in this business. But this really lowers him. It's not the kind of movie that's best suited for him. I want to see him in more serious gangster movies. I want to see him in more intense stuff. This movie is not an intense movie for Al Pacino. This movie is just actually telling him that his days are numbered and that he shouldn't be making a fool of himself. That's what this movie is just trying to tell him. This movie has just reduced Al Pacino to self-parody, which is embarrassing. There's a lot of scenes in this movie that embarrass me to think that Al Pacino would lower himself into a movie of this vernacular. Sure, I mean, okay, we can have a little humor in a crime movie. Why not? But this was over the top. This is self-parody. This is embarrassing, some of the stuff that happened in this movie. Is this the way how Hollywood treats its veteran performers? Shame! So the movie goes a little something like this. Al Pacino stars as Valentino. Or, for short, he likes to be referred to as Val. He is a petty crook. He was a gangster. You know, he teamed up with a guy named Doc, played by Christopher Walken, and he also teamed up with a driver by the name of Hirsch, played by Alan Arkin. They were a great trifecta of petty crooks. Um, Val's character served 28 years in jail, but also at the cost of which led to the death of his former accomplice's son. The accomplice was, of course, Claphans, played by Margolis. His son, in a bank robbery, was killed due to Val's carelessness. His son was killed, but Val served 28 years in jail. After serving 28 years in jail, Val is now a free man. And the only person who greets him at the gate was his old partner, Doc, played by Christopher Walken. But he's not greeting him particularly with open arms, but with the task of taking his life assigned by their old accomplice, the vengeful Claphans, played by Margolis. Claphans has revenge on his mind for Val, who was responsible for the death of his son, who aligned with Val, while Val served nearly 3 decades behind bars and has vowed that on the day of his release, he will be whacked. Doc is now also in a precarious situation because he has until 10 a.m. the next morning to take out Val, or else Claphans and his band of goons will take out not only Val, but he will also take out Doc as well. Now, Doc still has, a lot of great loyalty for Val, and does not really have the heart to kill Val right away. So they decide to spend all night painting the town red. But Doc also has probably, if I think so, he probably has the most interesting story because he's caught between two worlds. You see, he does, of course, he does not really want to shoot his old friend Val. I mean, he just got out of jail. He's an old man. He doesn't have very long to live. So, just spare him. But no, Claphans does not want him spared. He wants him served. So instead of, just pulling the trigger and shooting his head off, they decide to just go out into town, paint the town red, do a little mischief, fuck a little girls, and just have a good time for old time's sake. Like one big happy reunion. The other conflict that he also has, that's also quite interesting related to Doc, is that he's never got around to introducing himself to his granddaughter, played by Addison Timlin. All we know is, she's a young adult. She's probably in her late teens, maybe early 20s. She's working as a waitress, paying her way to college, I guess. And he's kind of struggling to get around to her. So, he's kind of like in a loophole. And of course, it's just that I've always thought that Doc's character also had a little more interesting storytelling with his character than Al Pacino's Val. Yes, Pacino is a marked man, and the old accomplice is out for revenge. And Doc, who has been spared after all these years, well, not only is Val's life on the line, but his life is on the line too. So what does he do? So for so what is he gonna do? So for the script to work, it needs to be in good hands of a trustworthy scriptwriter who can who knows where these characters are coming from, and to refrain from focusing too much on the plot, especially since the three leads are in the 70s plus club. Sadly, the script was written by the much younger, fresher playwright in Noah Heidel, who's making his feature-length screen debut. I mean, it's not to say that guy's got no future, but the film feels more theatrical than it does cinematic. Plus, there's no motives into what makes these characters tick. It's just saturated with too much talk, and it actually feels very random and frequent, and they are saying a lot without holding anything that sparks interest. Which makes this 95-minute film feel like a 2-hour film. The momentum is definitely at a snail's pace. Unlike the movies like The Godfather or Carlito's Way or Scarface, which is just energetic the whole way through, this movie does not have that energetic drive. It feels very theatrical. It feels like it's more dependent on dialogue rather than rather than like a good old shoot 'em up type of gangster film. You don't get really that much shoot 'em ups. There's no massive body count. And even though a lot of gangster movies are virtually character driven, it seems that the whole movie is completely dependent on the two leads, Al Pacino and Christopher Walken, and to some extent maybe Alan Arkin, who comes in as as a nursing home resuscitate named Hirsch, who was one time their driver, and now he's spending the rest of his life in a nursing home with with a with a breathing tank because now he's diagnosed with emphysema. So they kind of like rescue him out of a nursing home so that they could continue their quest to paint the town red again, just like old days. So the story generally just circles around the long hours of events prior to Val's demise, as Val and Doc get into some mischief as a ploy to stall the execution. Such activities include entering a whorehouse, fucking a bunch of Russian chicks, steal some Viagra. Hey, why not? It's a story about geriatric old guys, and obviously they just don't have the composure to pitch a tent. And yes, There is continual jokes about Al Pacino overdosing on Viagra, and now he can't keep his tallywhacker down. They steal a muscle car, and they're trying to get it operated, because nowadays you don't put keys into the ignition anymore. You press a button and you go vroom. Gathering another old comrade in crime, Hirsch, played by Alan Arkin. They eventually save a rape victim, played by Vanessa Ferlito, while leaving her to take revenge on them. And of course, they also operate a bulldozer to bury Hirsch, who sadly, of course, died from the natural causes. Sounds like a lot of activity happened in one night, right? With a full table like this had the makings of a great comedy caper, along with the pathos and the sad scenes combined. But when I think about all this excitement that happened in this one night alone, there really wasn't really that much excitement. It was just broken up into small little tiny fragments. You know, it was just skimming through these scenes. Sure that it seems like a lot of excitement, but in the end, it wasn't really much of a payoff, because you only see just tiny fragments of these scenes that I had aforementioned. So there really wasn't much to it. Sadly, Hadel only merely scratches the surface of these scenarios, which makes everything pointless. Sure, knowing that the film stars three screen legends like Al Pacino, Christopher Walken, and Alan Arkin in the leads, sure, it's truly worth the viewing. But that would be the only legitimate reason to watch this film at all. Arkin is truly the one who stands out the most here, but it's such a shame that he has the thinnest role. I mean, he did bring the scenes come to life once he was released from the hospital, and once he ends up having guilty sex because of the fact that he's a widowed man. I mean, when we were introduced to Hirsch, he was married to the same woman for 45 years, and then she died, and then he was placed in a nursing home, rotting away. Val and Doc, take him out of the nursing home, and it's like he feels like he's 30 again. And sure, and no, I'm not going to complain about the performances. The performances were okay, though it just doesn't seem to stick out. And the finale may have some moments of intrigue, but I just wish there would have been some kind of disclosure towards the finale. The finale just felt like, come on. I mean, yes, I know Doc and Val, gather their weapons and take down Claphands and his other gang of goons who are like hiding out in some kind of abandoned warehouse. But we never actually see an actual conclusion because it just fades out after. Does Val and Doc survive the ordeal? Did Val and Doc kill off all of Claphands' goons and Claphands himself? We never know because it just fades to black after that. The credits roll. So I was left pretty unsatisfied. Sadly, the script and the snail pacing of this film made this long night all the more longer. So this movie really left me in a deep pool of unsatisfaction. Because even though there are a lot of exciting things that could have happened in this movie that could have been further etched out, it was only just breaking down into small, tiny fragments, which doesn't make anything exciting. The dialogue that was given to them didn't really spark very much interest. And for this movie to be kind of like a gangster film, felt like it was more dialogue driven than action packed. I mean, sure, there's dialogue in Scarface and Carlito's Way and the Godfather movies and all the other stuff that Al Pacino has starred in. Serpico, definite classic. But in the end, we are shortchanged. I felt shortchanged after watching this movie. And there are, of course, a lot of scenes that are embarrassing to watch. And to see a legend like Al Pacino lower himself, that just doesn't do me a world of justice. I mean, there are some good scenes. There is some tight direction. And, being the fact that we have three great legends to at least try to dish out some decent performances, to at least make this feel like it's not a complete 100% abomination. It still left me with a taste of unsatisfaction in my mouth. And I think that if given the proper script, or given a better script writer to get a better understanding of these characters, then Stand Up Guys could have been a whole lot better. But still, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, and I think I might be pretty generous, or maybe I'm just biased of the veterans, but I guess since being that we have three legends to the screen, and these are the only three performers that is really worth watching, and even though they're in the 70+ club, they still somehow manage to carry the film over. And for that, out of 10, I give Stand Up Guys. I can't give this any much higher. I'll give it a 6. So I guess this ends my rider review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember, be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, keep watching those movies. And I'll see you around. Goodbye.